So hi gang, today I'm off to have my CT scan done of my nose and to see whether there's any involvement in the sinuses of my face, as I explained previously. The bad news is that I've discovered that's four skin cancer, BCC, on my nose. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the doctor's going to approach getting these off my skin, because they're not little skin cancers, they're fairly extensive ones. So I think I'm probably not going to have much of my nose left, and being compounded by that is usually they'll take a rotation flap. So they'll take a piece of your forehead and they will rotate it down to create a new nose. Now the problem with that is, if I've already got skin cancer cells in that particular area of my skin, they're not going to replace it, just in case there might be some recurrence of it, I beg your pardon, in the future. Now you can get recurrences with about 50% of basal cells. So for those of you who are out there that have had previous basal cells, it's extremely important that you get an annual check, and the annual checks will detect any new spots. So it's very important that you have a full body check with basal cells in particular, because where there's one, there's usually others lurking. Now the problem with the basal cells, as I explained to you previously, is that they can, although they're slow growing and they usually spread along the skin, they can drop below the surface of the skin and sort of move a bit like an octopus arm. So they can bring up a little tentacle in another area locally, but it also can be due to the fact that you have already damaged cells that are going to react to very little stimuli in the future. So the basal cells can sort of spring up and seed in other areas around the original. About 50% of primary tumours can reoccur again, so it's extremely important that you have annual checks by an expert. And if you're going to get a basal cell removed, make sure the doctor knows what he's doing. I did have Mohs surgery previously, which has been fantastic. I got a really good result, but I was aware that under the skin there was this crawling sort of ant sensation, like a little insect sort of, burrowing under the skin. Now unfortunately you can't see that, and if it's not on the skin surface and there's no evidence of it on the skin surface, then your doctor's not going to know about it either. And potentially this may be what's caused my problem. The fact that I was only aware of a little bit of dry skin around my nostrils, and I did have biopsies taken last year, and the biopsies came back as just a little sun damage. So I was a bit suspicious of that. And the problem being though, once you've had these punch biopsies, your body sets up a little immune response. So it's very difficult to go back after a month or 2 months and then have another biopsy done. So I noticed that one of the biopsies kept bleeding, one of the sites kept bleeding, and it just wasn't going to heal properly. I did go back to the dermatologist involved at that stage, who recommended that I try some Epidex treatment. Now Epidex does two things. It can treat precancerous growths like solar keratosis, but secondly it's really a good treatment for very superficial basal cell carcinomas. So there was sort of a double-edged sword to using that particular treatment at the time. So I did get a reaction with the Epidex, got a really good reaction, had a bit of a scabby nose, and it was all horrible for a little while, and that eventually healed and things seemed to settle down. After I had the Epidex treatment, it seemed to settle for a little while, and that was great. I thought, wonderful, we've just got some solar keratosis that we've had to deal with. Not long after, I would say about 4 months later, I was getting a bit of crusting skin, a bit of dry flaky skin, which you can get if you've got a dermatitis. And certainly I went back to the dermatologist, and that's what he thought I did have. He thought I had a little bit of dermatitis, so recommended that I use a bit of steroidal cream, which I did. Unfortunately, when I stopped using that, the issue would come back. So I detected another little spot on the tip of my nose, which you'll probably see because I'm not wearing any makeup today. And I went to a lovely GP who I trust implicitly at a beautiful GP surgery in Green Road, not saying where, but in Green Road, and they were fabulous. I thought that it would be an idea that because I'd had the Epidex and perhaps I still had this solar keratosis, which is what the first dermatologist thought it might be, that I would go through a treatment of Aldara this time, because I knew again that Aldara can sometimes treat superficial basal cells. So I commenced on that cream and I had been using it for 3 weeks when all hell broke loose on my skin. It was completely whatever was there on my whole face, and I was only using it on my nose, but my whole face just went boosh. So, which was fantastic because the whole area that I was concerned with on my nose was very difficult to see, and there was no obvious signs and symptoms on the surface. And even using a cystoscope or using a dermatoscope, I really couldn't see any of the vessels that I needed to see to give me an indication of the fact that I did have basal cells growing on my nose. So it wasn't as if I didn't know what I was looking for. The problem is it was very difficult to see unless you've got a trained eye, and so this is why I was going to doctors with little circles drawn around the border of my nose, and at the time I thought, wow, they're pretty big tumours, but again, you know, reassured by other doctors that they weren't. So anyway, I'm using the Aldara ointment, and bang, you know, my face ulcerates, and I can see very clearly the basal cell carcinomas that I had been trying to explain to previous dermatologists. So I went back to see my GPs and asked for a referral and was referred to a lovely plastic surgeon. I wanted to see a plastic surgeon. In my experiences, I'm more happy to go and see a plastic surgeon when it comes to reconstruction, particularly on your face. I think it's always good to go to somebody who knows where all your little blood vessels and nerves are, and to get the best result, not just cosmetically, but you know, for future prevention. It's really important to get all of those cells out and to try and ensure that you're not going to suffer from any further consequences. So here I am, and he saw me and immediately thought, wow, you know, this girl is in for a little ride here. But again, the problem is that I have been having some sinus issues on the left side of my face, and unfortunately it started not long after I had the previous reconstruction, the previous Mohs surgery. So again, this crawling ant feeling was getting worse. I was feeling like this sort of burning feeling in the bone, very, very tender in the bone. I'm hoping I've got sinusitis, please. But if not, you know, that's a serious issue that we're going to have to look at and deal with. Now, the second issue I have is, again, potentially we're going to have to address, you know, we being my surgeon and myself, are going to have to address what we're going to do about this thing, because I've now got 4 cancers. So he doesn't have a lot of tissue to work with. Now, the problem with basal cell is that apart from the tumour, so the actual cancer itself, in order to get a clearance, there needs to be a 3 mil to 5 mil clearance, which means that they don't only take the tumour, they take an extra, let's say 5 mil, and that depends on the type of cancer cell it is. I was saying to you earlier that basal cell carcinoma, BCCs, have about 5 different categories. So they can be just superficial, they can be ulcerating, they can be infiltrative, they can be nodular. So they're all treated differently. Unfortunately, with 2 types of BCC, which is one of the infiltrating, they can go into bone and into surrounding tissues. So if you imagine that your tumour, you know, for example, the one on my left nostril, the left ala they call it, is at least 1.5 centimetres in diameter. So I'll be losing an extra 5 mil around that. So we're looking at at least 5 mil. So we're looking at around at least 2 centimetres of tumour. So for those of you in Australia, probably looking at, you know, at least the size of a 10-cent piece, or the size of a dime in the USA, or is it the size of a quarter in the USA? Anyway, whatever you put into a telephone, I think that's a quarter. So it's fairly large. Now that's just on one side of my nose. On the other side I've got a similar tumour, and up here on the left, on the right hand side at the top. So when you're taking, you know, between 2 and 3 centimetres in diameter off this side, 2 off this side, and, you know, another one up this side, then you haven't got much tissue left. So this is why it's really, really important that you understand completely that BCC is cancer. It's not a little cancer. You know, doctors really shouldn't be burning it off unless they've diagnosed or they have done a biopsy and know exactly what type of BCC tumour you have sitting on your face. Now, anything on the head and neck needs to be addressed very seriously. Personally, love GPs, but I wouldn't be letting a GP cut into my face. And just as I wouldn't be allowing a GP to cut out a breast tumour, I wouldn't expect my sons to go to a GP and have a testicular lump removed. So I want to be dealing with people who are specifically trained in anything to do with head and neck. There are some dermatologists who specialise in that area. However, I would always be talking to my GP, getting a referral if whatever country you're in, or getting to see a specialist plastic surgeon or a specialist dermatologist who deals with head and neck cancers. So that's going to be something I'm going to have to address with the surgeon once I've got the results back from my CT scan, and I'm going to be there any moment, so hopefully I will get the results as soon as possible. Hopefully they will give me the results. If not, I'm hoping to get the results sometime during the week. Now, I'm seeing my surgeon again next Tuesday, so hopefully he will be able to let me know what the plan is. I know that I'll be having some biopsies to see exactly what type of tumours we're dealing with here. I'm hoping that they're just BCCs, because, you know, they being the slowest growing tumour of the skin cancers. So it's important for me that I know exactly what the doctor's dealing with as well. So I will love you and leave you, and please stay safe. Please stay safe in the sun. Even driving here, you know, I have sunblock on. The windscreen isn't going to protect you from any UVR unless it's laminated. And even if you have the very best window tinting on your car, it's probably only 70% SPF rated. So you're still going to get a lot of residual UVR. And in Perth currently, we're looking at a UVR level of anything between 11 and 13. And hopefully you should know that if the UVR level is 3 or above, wherever you are located on the planet, then you need to be wearing full sun safety protection, including 50 SPF factor, makeup, moisturizer, sunblock. Make sure your clothes have a UPF rating. Make sure you have a hat and your sunglasses are approved by the cancer councils in any of your countries or states. And take care of yourself. You're precious. Bye for now.